dry throwing technique. The next thing I want to throw for you is, next thing we're going to go through is, yeah, why don't we? Okay, so what I want to do is, okay, cooking, this is like a cooking show, right? Cooking show coming up. Yes. Okay, door number 3, wait a minute, goes like this. 2, well actually 4, 3, 2. And I need to make 1 for you. I'm going to make 1. We're going to go to 2. I'm going to show you how to do 2 and 3. And this is the part I can't quite show you because there's sanding, and I will try to go through sanding a little bit. The difference between the edges here and the edges here have to do with the sanding that I do in the greenware stage. But after that, and when the piece is high fired, you can see the difference between this piece and this piece. This is the result of the slumping that's occurring in firing. So it's pretty dramatic amount of slumping that's occurring. I'm going to put this piece back for safety. So the next thing I would like to do is to throw a shape something like this for you because it's all in the dry throwing. It is a different, wow. Somebody did a great job. I feel like real heel if I don't use this much clay. Because you get so much hard time wedging. Oh, man, I just don't know.
So is it slumped differently every time when you're firing?
Yeah, I mean, each piece has got its own personality. And they're just going to slump. That piece that you see over there, do you see how it was cut down further than this one? Like this piece was only cut down to this far, and that piece back there was cut down to that far. This piece is not going to fall as far, but it's still going to fall. So I didn't cut this down all the way because if I did yesterday when I was making this piece, when it was at that leather hard stage, it would have some more gravity weighing on this point, which is a pressure point. And when I cut it down all the way further, I will have made a chuck for it to sit in so that it's not, well, it's drying. Because once it gets bone dry, that pressure point isn't going to come to bear. It's when it's in that interim stage of leather hard that you have to sort of think about that aspect of it. Well, what do you guys think? If I fail, it's your fault. Well, then we'd have to start again. Oh, we have to all have chocolate cakes. Yes. I'm going to have to get me one of these whisper wheels. Oh, gosh, it's amazing. It makes no sound. Where's the motor?
I know somebody, Jennifer, that knows all about them. give you one and take a picture of your work.
They're too expensive for that. Again, you know, I'm just sort of using my body weight. So, you know, that works out pretty good. Think about it. The less buses I have, the more body weight I have, it's still very much. I always throw this way. They got me this great chair. Now, I have one of these at home, and so I asked for one, and they're hard to get because the wheels, they're made different. Mine's old. So they, the wheels can't normally come off because of the post in the middle. So they brilliantly duct tape the wheels like this. So I got infinite, it's like I got infinite levels, and I use those levels all the time. And it's like when I demonstrate without that, I'm sitting here going like this, just like somebody who's used to stick shift, right? You come to a light, you try and shift down, and you're automatic. All right, so I'm going to punch this hole down. I'm working a bit fast and loose for expedience's sake. I don't want us to get bored. Again, the first few pulls, I'm using the outside of my right hand to pull up with. Try and move that clay. I don't have control of it yet. Like that bottom. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
Have you always worked in porcelain?
Yeah, I've always worked in porcelain. Yes, I have always worked in porcelain. You know, well, like after my first 1,000 pots or so, I think, you know, 2,000 or something. It was like about into the second year of my professional career that I switched over to porcelain completely. I've been playing with it before. The work was a lot different at that point. I mean, this work has evolved through the course of a 33-year professional career. And when I started, we were living in Florida and doing all the art show circuit in Florida, and it was, you know, a lot of mugs and bowls, and we'd go out to the street shows and sell them on bricks and boards, and, you know, it was great. And so I was making porcelain teapots and mugs and bowls, selling them on bricks and boards. Well, actually, after a couple of years, I mean, because we're porcelain now, we're slick, right? We actually built pedestals. Yeah. The Florida art show circuit's interesting because they've got a lot of award money and judging, and they always have. And so you know, it kind of skewed the artist mentality away from functional because the judges were fairly prejudiced toward non-functional work. Well, so, I mean, here you have all these young starving artists trying to make a living, and they have to choose, am I going to be selling my mugs, or am I going to be going for the award money? And it's awfully tempting to try and start making your work towards what's going to win awards when you figure, I mean, back in those days, like that was the early 80s and on, you'd be selling, your mug would be $7, you know, that's a standard price for a mug. $7 mug, or possibly, you might, if you, like, say you got second place in clay, that would be like $500. Man, that's a lot of mugs when you think about it. So it was sort of tempting to start working towards non-functional, and I must admit that I succumbed to that temptation. And, you know, started leaving off handles and stuff because the judges didn't like handles. I'm still wrestling this baby up here so that I can show you this technique. Well, I have some fairly serious air bubbles in here that I can.
Jennifer, would you ever use two 5-pound?
Would I ever use two 5-pound pieces of clay?
Put them together, would it make a difference in the end?
I never have. When I throw fairly stiffly, and I don't think they would stick together. Well, since I have my pug mill, there's no need for that. When I'm throwing larger pieces, which I don't actually throw in porcelain, but like floor bases and such, I use the coil throwing technique where I'll throw a bowl shape, then I will extrude coils and throw the coils on. Well, you take I use about an inch diameter coil that I have extruded from my clay extruder, and I put it on the top of my pot, and then I continue to throw that up. So 1 inch diameter coil will give me about 6 inches of throwing, and you just keep going like that until your pot is. You can throw up to the ceiling with that technique. I mean, it's so easy to throw big pots. Actually, I had a friend who went and toured some of the potteries in Vietnam. And she came back and told about these cool big coil pots that they were throwing there, and they were apparently hand spinning the wheels underneath the floor, and then they were adding them on. They would slap on a coil, like a flat coil, either to one side of the pot or the other, and then go on up. So if the pot was going out, they would slap on that coil like a shingle overlaying on the inside, and if the pot was going in, they'd slap it on the outside. And I thought, well, that makes perfect sense. So I had North Star make me a die that was shaped. It was the 1 inch diameter, but it had an addition of a little tier on the end, so it was shaped like that. So then when my extruded coil, I started putting that tier part either on one side or the other, and it made it so much faster because I didn't have to add like score and slip and all that stuff.
So how did you navigate that issue that you were talking about, where you've got the functional cups versus the prize-winning piece in a show?
Okay. So what did I do about that? What did I make? Well, I left off the teapots, which I was sad about because I loved them, and started making covered jars, like the little round covered jars, because they were kind of cool looking, and they were. I started looking at shapes. You know how in real estate they tell you, oh, you have to have curved appeal for your house. Well, we found that for our displays, we had to have curb appeal. So the whole thing had to look great together. So I definitely wanted to keep price points. I couldn't just have all big pots. So I made those, and I made little perfume bottles because they also had a shape, but they were smaller. Like they were little, but they went in with the other things that I was doing. And then various vase forms, and then bottle forms, because the vase forms was different than the bottle forms. Or a covered jar with lids that came up like that, and that I had horizontal pieces in my display as well as vertical pieces. And then when I put the whole display together, I looked at the whole thing and how did it look as a whole? Like, okay, I have a vertical piece here, a horizontal piece here. Okay, a little piece goes here. I look for even weight of what it looks like on the whole display. Coloring, in those days, the pots were a lot different than they are now, and so I used Celadon, like a light blue Celadon, a copper red that I was very proud of because it's my own copper red, and a mirror black glaze. And so I had to have a good balance of all of those. We're not at the dry throwing part yet. What I'm doing is I'm standing up because I'm trying to get vertical over the top of this piece. When you're pulling up a piece, I tend to throw them off center because I'm like sort of pulling out. So if I can get on top of them, I can. Okay, we're going to pretend that this is like really great. I've done a great job of pulling up this cylinder, and it's really super thin. And it's like, and we all live in heaven. So once I get my cylinder pulled up and it's at the thickness that I want, then I throw away the sponge. And now I'm going to pick up these ribs, and I'm going to be using this dry throwing technique. And as with the last piece, the first thing I do is I go ahead and squeegee that piece to get my finger marks off and to squeegee out the slurry. I don't want that to sit on there 1 second longer than it has to, because it's continuing to penetrate into that wall of your clay and make that porcelain more weak. Okay, so once I do that, I want to make this form, this sort of vase-shaped form. I want to make that this vertical shape turn into more of a spherical shape. And as you know, all of your horizontals require more strength than a vertical shape, and that's why they're so difficult to attain. As our potters, we know it's easier just to throw up our cylinder than it is to make a sphere. So with dry throwing, it allows you to have that vertical belly a little better. The first thing that I do when I'm throwing this type of shape is start at the top to create a little lip. See that curve that I'm making? I'm sort of pinning down the neck of the piece with this rib here, and I'm starting to push out the shoulder with this rib here, like that. And this one that's pinning down the neck is sort of holding the piece in place. And I have to work on this. I can't push too fast, and so bear with me. You just sort of have to ease this in. And as I did before, I keep pulling off this scrapings. Once I have that little thing, because your little corrugation is going to give you strength, that little curve, then I can go down, I'm going to go down and I'm going to start nailing the bottom. I'm going to start pulling out the bottom. The way that I do this is, and again, I am using the bottom, the outside rib underneath supporting and using the inside rib to push out. So in this piece, I don't want the rim to go out and out. I want to make a belly. So I go from top to bottom, and then from bottom up to top. Holding, using the outside rib to sort of support the inside rib. That's the point of that. You just have to try it. Now, as soon as you get this much slurry on, then you're getting more surface area. You're creating drag, but you're not holding them. You're holding them. See, you're holding them pretty perpendicularly to the piece. Your ribs.
And to repeat, compressing the upper part, the neck, is going to help to give you more strength as you're working up to it. Is that it?
Yeah, well, compressing does, but do you see that little curve there?
Sure.
Okay. Well, curves give you strength. Just like a corrugated roof is stronger than a flat roof. So anytime you put a little curve into your piece, like in any form that you do at any time, you're not just making something pretty, but you're adding a structural component into your form. And this is a really cool thing to think about all the way around. Whenever you're making a piece, what is your action doing in terms of structurally the piece? Are you adding to the strength of the piece, or are you just taking away? In my work, I like to balance that, well, the addition and the subtraction of that. I gotta use this, guys, sorry. This bottom is not what it should be. Like it would like to have aluminum. necessary. I didn't deal with it because it's not hurting anything, but.
Where's the inside really
Yeah. Right there.
Would you normally work downward with your ribs, or are you doing that because your bottom of the pot's so wet?
This is the normal, I normally work like this, and Courtney gave a great explanation that I hadn't thought of. I just did it because I thought, well, this is how to do it, top to bottom, like top to 2/3 down, bottom to 2/3 up, and just sort of coax out your form. And she was also working her form down after she threw her cup up, and she said something about if you go in one direction and spiral it out, keep going up, then if you work down sometimes you put the clay back into certain groups that you created going the opposite direction. I thought, that makes sense. But I'd never quite thought of it in those terms. To me, it was just always, well, it seems to work best this way. It's like my modus operandi. I just make pots. I do that because that's what I'm good at, and there isn't anything else. And so then people want explanations, and I have to like come up with something that sounds. Oh dear. When in doubt, fake it.
You know what I like to say? There's 1,000 ways to do things, but my way's the way.
That's right. You want to keep this curve, you see, because it really does help with the strength. I'm switching this over because to the flat because I've gotten myself into a nice convex situation. I can bite on more of the surface. Yes, I'm biting on the surface vertically. I mean, like with this whole thing, but I still only have that much surface area, so I'm not only not having the surface tension, you know, that my fingers would set up, or you know, that drag, but I'm also creating more even compression by pushing all of that clay together into that sharp place.
than this below right now?
Well, it's a lot thicker on the bottom than it is on the top.
In the middle.
There's two things, well, I don't know. We can find out.
When you're working in the studio, do you normally throw a series of pots at a time?
Yes, I do throw in work cycles. I will do a series of pieces over the course of how long it takes me to get through a work cycle, which is generally around 2 weeks. You know, if I'm making larger pieces, such as a piece this size, I will, that piece is going to hang around a little longer as it's waiting to dry. But on a throwing day, I'll just throw. And I try to throw light forms. I mean, I might loosen up in the morning with a couple of shapes that are 6 pounds, but if I'm throwing 10, 12 pounders, I try to do them together because I can seem to build up a certain type of focus for a particular type of form I'm throwing. I've been throwing pots my whole life, and every single time that I go into the studio to throw these forms, it's not easy for me. It never has been. I try to push the edge of what I'm doing. Every single pot that I make, like I try to make it as spherical as possible, as radical of a shape each time. So when I'm working in my studio throwing, I am not thinking too much about what I want that shape to become. I'm only thinking about trying to attain a perfect form within that shape alone. And then that shape, it can become a number of different things. But the first thing it has to do is to be a good pot. Because it doesn't matter how much I alter or carve that piece. If I have started with a clumsy form, I'm going to end up with a clumsy, altered, carved form. Unfortunately. This is the effect of hand wedging clay that is way too hard. We have a few air bubbles and we're trying to decide if we're going to ignore them or try and deal with them. The reason that I wish I wasn't doing this and just ignoring them is that this usually doesn't work anyway. You see, I can work on this form all day if I wanted. I could just sit here and it's never going to fall apart on me, is it? It's not ever going to go anywhere because it's not getting more water. That was about 2/3 down. See, I've got that little concavity there, so I have to work at first with this curved side of the rib. But as soon as I can, I want to flip that over to use that flat, because because I've got a little more control of that curve, because I can control the curve that's in my the flat edge of my rib. Have I ever worked with other porcelain bodies? I started with my own porcelain body, and it grew beautifully, but it was too short for all the alterations that I'm doing now. And I switched to this, I tried a whole bunch of different porcelain bodies back a long time ago, and found this Miller 550 to be very balanced for me. Also, it has a sort of buttery surface because it seems to have more vitrification than some other porcelains, which is important for me because I am working with bare porcelain. I haven't really, I did experiment with a few bodies, and I wasn't able to find one that I was as pleased with. But you have to remember that we've grown up together. I mean, I've had this body before it was bought out by Laguna. It was an East Coast body. Laguna's had it for a long time, and in the last few years they've actually made it so that it's nationally distributed, so you can get it anywhere. I should probably try some other bodies, but see. Well, I like to use Southern ice for my little you-know-me's. Somebody can grab that cup and pass it around. You can sort of, there's a little cup back there, and you can see how translucent it is. It's more white and translucent than the Miller, but it will not stand up to my, it throws pretty well, but it really doesn't like to be, it has to be sticky wet when it's altered. Like, you have to think about how a porcelain, for me, I have to think about how well it can be altered. Can it be severely altered? A lot of them really will sort of crack as it's drying if it's pressed too hard. Now that Southern ice has to be sort of sticky wet when it's altered that severely as what that little cup is. If I make those little cups with the Miller, it's so easy, it's a piece of cake. But then they're not so translucent. Oh my gosh. We get so obsessed, porcelain artists, with stuff like translucency. Say again? Oh, Southern Ice is from Australia. I think the name of the company is Clayworks of Australia, and it's now distributed by Seattle Pottery Supply when they can get it. And I think there's been issues with flooding in the kaolin mine in New Zealand, isn't it? It's the Kongongwa, how do you say that? Kongongwa kaolin. I don't think I have it quite right. It's a particular kaolin that's mined in New Zealand, and then they formulate the porcelain in Australia.
Jennifer, do you single fire? Or do you
Good
just
question. Do I single fire? You know, these pieces theoretically could be single fired, and I did single fire for years, my bare porcelain, because you could say, why should you double fire them if you're not going to glaze them? But since I've been manipulating the firing direction of the pieces, I often need more strength in the pieces. If I am balancing these pieces upside down on a kiln post so that gravity is running in the opposite direction, such as that Marguerite's vessel that you saw in the other room, the one that's going like that. Well, it was balanced on a 15-inch kiln post, and that form like that was just slice, you know, using a Dremel tool with those little diamond burrs that you get, those diamond points that you get from Diamond Burr Dental Supply. And that, you know, you can do that when it's greenware. And then when it vitrifies, it changes a lot because I've sliced it up so much. Well, I could never balance that thing when it was greenware. I mean, I couldn't turn it upside down. It would be way too fragile. So if you're going to mess around with your piece when you want to have a little more stability to it.
Do you bisque to 04?
I bisque to 06.
Then for the next fire, they're actually flipped upside down,
Yeah.
and taken to the phone pen.
Yep, they're taken to foam 10. And there's a picture of that in that little handout that you have there. Like the last 3 pictures on there show the firing step.
So even that piece on the second shelf, the final firing was upside down?
The piece like this one is not upside down. That's right side up. You can see how where gravity's going like so. But the piece isn't completely right side up. It's actually fired in a chuck, you know, like a chuck that's the right size. And I put kale wool, aligned the chuck with kale wool. And the reason I do that is I want to tip that piece slightly, like a 5-degree forward and to the side for the purpose of aligning the gravity. Like I cut away so much on one side and not on the other that if I was just to fire it straight up and down, it would be unbalanced. So if I just tip it slightly, and that's calculation. You just have to calculate like how much gravity you have, how much you've taken away, so how far it's going to fall, so how much you're going to tip it, so that it falls where you want it to be, so that it's a balanced form. That is really fun. That's the fun part for me right now, is to like figure out what I can make this firing process do for me. How much can I change the piece that way? So exciting. The pieces come out so different from how they come in. Go in.
So when you're throwing, do you throw a chuck for each piece?
Do I throw a chuck for each piece? No, I don't. I don't need to have that perfect alignment because the kale wool does that. The kale wool gives you enough give in between that you can take a piece that has been used over and over again, a chuck that's been used over and over again, and actually put in greenware into it, which I do once fire the pieces that I put in the chuck quite often. There's not much reason not to do it. And it depends on, you know, I might still do it if I have extra room in my kiln, but if I don't, I won't. I don't overstack my kilns when they're greenware. I just use 10 cubic foot electric kilns, and they're rated cone 8, and I fire up to cone 10. Don't tell anybody.
I think that's very true. Blackmail.
Jennifer, what did you call it? You lined the disc with what? I mean, the
Kale wool, or fiber fats is another name for it. It's the same stuff that they use to insulate your raccoon kilns.
Okay.
Jennifer, when you were doing your first several pulls, did you leave more clay in an area where you needed to mill it out? Or was it pretty even all the way up and down?
It was as even as I could make it. I'm not that good. It was like, I'm just trying to get this baby up here without having to collapse.
I didn't know where, when you're stretching it so far.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. It does stretch out, but I don't know if this one is so much, but generally speaking, they change forms. So if I have thrown a piece up so high, then my sphere is only going to be this high. They really flatten out. So it's not primarily, I think there's a bit of stretching going on, but I think that primarily it's just rearranging the shape. Did you guys notice while I was talking? I wasn't trying to be sneaky, but I just was sort of forgetting about it, that I used more water at that point to collar in. That if I want to make the piece even, like if I want to collar in and make the piece smaller, then that clay is going to get thicker again. It's got to have water again. I mean, I can't squeeze clay together with these ribs. It only rearranges the shape. So if you're making a bottle form or collaring in any way, then you do have to add a little more water, which I did to the top. So, as I said, my objective is to make this guy as horizontal as possible. You see, I'm moving down. Can you see that? I want this form to flow together. I don't want bumps in it. I put the alterations in later, and I don't want to fight with my alterations, so I try to make my drone forms smooth. Okay, so I work on the top of that shape and get the top just how I wish it to be. I try to make I come in, and as I was thinning this out a little bit, I do that. If I was just having a throne form and I wasn't going to alter and cut it, I would choose aesthetically to have a thicker rim than this. But my rim is the same. I'm trying right now to get my rim the same as the rest of my wall because, see, I cut that all away. And if I had a thicker rim, that would be funny for my application. Okay, so I have now gotten my top how I wish it to go. And I'm going to basically cut this piece off. The extra clay that I have left down on the bottom, now it's time for it to go away. Again, like I threw the open form, I'm not going to cut all the way down. I'm going to leave a little platform of clay so that I'm not pushing that pot off with as I'm pushing. Okay, and as I did with the other piece, I want to now, I've cut away the extra clay down there. I want to go ahead and compress that bottom again. So I have equal compression on the bottom and the rest of the piece. I'm continuing this pull a little ways because I was compressing it, but then there was I want to smooth it into the rest of the body of the shape. Okay. Such as that. Now, if I was taking all my time, I'd probably do that 2 or 3 times. Go ahead and now cut my little clay cookie off of there. one more time with the compression. I want this piece to be even. You see, I threw it off a little bit when I did that. Okay. So then I take this little bevel, cut again with my needle tool. Just cut this off. And that's it. So here we have now let's go ahead and get the star back. Star show. 1, 2, 3, 4 in our cooking show. Like be the last piece. But this is something that I do first is I'll go ahead and I'll put the start of that in. And usually I put the start in first because that edge is going to continue to get drier. And having that can be useful in sort of holding this together as I'm altering the joint. Last thing I did want to show you is this alteration. And this piece is too wet to alter, but we're going to go ahead anyway. Because this shows you the alteration of the diagonal alteration. Okay, let's see if I can see it. I normally am not going to be working on my lap like this, but so it's a little awkward, but I still think it's maybe
How do you normally do it?
just like this. Well, I'm actually I'm sitting with a counter and it's not on a pottery. I don't use a bending wheel. I just spin it. I just turn it, and the counter is higher, so more like this.
The banding will make it easier.
Yeah, I suppose. Sometimes I use a bending wheel. Sometimes it seems to work better without, I don't know why. One would think a bending wheel would always be better.
Do you ever reverse direction on that?
Yeah, I do reverse direction if there's some reason why but maybe I'm nesting the pieces and I want them to go the opposite way. But I don't arbitrarily do it because I'm right-handed. I'm following the curve of my hands. So this is the most natural thing for me to do. It's easy enough for me to reverse it, but why? At least I've never figured it out. Why I do anything.
I was just wondering if there's more strength to it. If
Oh,
you
no.
keep that bridge going
Like
in the
because
same
we're in the
direction.
northern hemisphere, like the toilet's supposed to be on the southern. If you're in the southern hemisphere, that is something I've always been interested to see. Is that true?
I didn't pay attention.
So basically, I've made these same lines. Can you see what I'm doing right now?
Yeah.
So now I've sort of set that up, and I can go ahead and really press this right into the diagonal in the same way as I press that bottle form into that vertical. See how the piece is getting smaller? That baby right on down there.
Yes, thank you.
Like that. Well, guys, it's been really fun meeting you. I think it's been a wonderful conference, and now we all must say our dues, unfortunately, but it's been so much fun for everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next thing we should go on our cooking show is how to go ahead and carve this piece. So this is the one I did yesterday, so you can see where we're going with it. And I'll just run through it with you if you're interested. Okay, carve. I use number 6 pen, so set number 6 pencil, soft pencil. This WS Sgraffito tool, which is available here, and this is the Kemper R3. I think it's 3. It's either 3 or 1, and then this is the other one, 1 or 3, but both of them are available here. I sort of grind this down. When I get, this one's really so old, it's perfect, and it's about to break. They get to the point, they get better and better until they break, right? Just like us. But I sort of grind them down a bit on the right side, or on the left side, because I'm right-handed, so that it's sharp to start with. And then the last tool I'm using is the number 11 X-Acto knife blade. You see I've got a bit of that sponge stuff under here. And paper tape. We like paper tape. Here's another use for your paper tape. Even if you never cut yourself, you can have that paper tape in reserve, and you can make all your tools nice and soft to work with. But I went and I made sure to get my X-Acto blade holder, one that loosens on the bottom, so that I can paper tape this part up here. You can buy them both ways, but that's okay. So the first thing I will do, you see these little cracks here? They're not desirable, but I forgot to make a chuck for this, so I was like just trimming it like this earlier, and they came here. But they aren't going to bother this piece at all, because I'm going to be cutting away where those cracks would be. It's an interesting thing to contemplate. You get a cracked piece. Oh, gee, can I make this purposeful? But at any rate, the first thing I do is to sort of lay down what I would call valley lines. It's just a line going in down through the lowest part of the valley of this corrugation of the alteration. In this piece, I'm not ever going to touch these lines, but these lines are sort of like my fences for my other lines that I'm going to draw. They can be fairly I can make them fairly rough because, well, because I've done it. But the other thing is, though, that you want to work fast because you only have a short window of time while your piece is leather hard to get all of your carving done. It's sort of, you know, I get the question all the time, how long did it take you to make that piece? I mean, that one there on your display, because they think I'm going to get confused. I get this confused look on my face. I'm thinking, how am I going to dissuade this question one more time? And so I try to look confused, like I don't know what they're talking about. So they clarify it. No, I mean that one, right there. How long did that piece take? And well, I can't really, it's hard to figure out because you know it's all of these different steps, and then you have to put all these different steps together. But that being said, thank you. Bear in mind that you only have a 1 to 3 hour window of time to get all of your hard carving done. And so it's taken me 30 years to be able to carve that fast. So the question is like, how much time does that take? It must have taken forever. It's like, how can you get that done in a period of time that porcelain allows you to have that leather hard state. So I've also drawn in my valley lines. I've actually in my own mind called these my longitude and latitude lines. You can see it more clearly that they would be longitude lines in here. But that's what I'm using them for. I'm using them as points of reference, not as something that I'm drawing directly to. The next thing I'm going to do to create that piece is I'm going to go ahead and draw where my edge is going to be, right? So the first line is edge draw. So I go all the way, I've come from this point and I'm taking that all the way down here because I want that big slice. I just wanted to show you something. This is a little aside. I'm hoping this is going to help you understand. This piece, right, it is still plastic. Well, I guess it's being held by this, but I mean, as soon as you cut this, go. You're not listening. Say, I like being a bottom. I usually do this with this tool. Well, it's supposed to be more than that, but you know, see, they won't hold up anymore. See, because I've cut away the support. I could sit here and bounce that form as much as I wanted to, and it had that strong support inherent in the thrown form. Well, as soon as you broach that, when your form becomes plastic, you're going to get slumping, whether it's that plastic state at that white hot vitrification point, or the plastic state of your plastic. So that being said, you got this big long cut. That is going to allow me lots of movement in the firing, such as that piece.
So do you do a big long cut first or last?
That cut is not going to be a problem when it's leather hard because it's not plastic anymore. But in terms of whether that cut comes last or first, you know, I'm thinking about that. It's a good question, actually. I actually make the smaller cuts first because you are, even in the leather hard state, you're keeping it, you got it's some vulnerability. I think that was the word I was looking for. Okay, so I'm just going to sort of like vaguely draw the lines that I'm going to follow. doesn't matter that these are not like exact, because these are just gonna burn out. But I'm sort of showing you as well as myself the general thing. I'm going from valley into hill, but I'm starting at that valley and I'm walking across and down into the valley. I'm following the goat path that is sort of the contour of the road a little so I don't have to take such a direct path down, but so now I'm going to go on down to I'm getting really lost as a goat.
Maybe you're a herd of goats.
Say again?
You're a herd of goats.
That's right. Oh, what I really need is a couple of collie dogs. So now I've got all of my lines there, sort of. I'm now going to use this WS tool to start my pattern.
Are those the lines you're going to cut later? or
These
those
are the lines that I'm going to cut later. This is that piece where I am carving surface decoration on the outside of the piece. You know, where I'm carving also, especially if I was actually, if this was a piece from my studio, it would be a fair amount thinner than this. And so when I carve this away even thinner, I'm creating translucency. Let me see if I can show you. Well, show it up to the window, you would see what's going to happen. Can you sort of see the translucency in there? Yeah. So that's, you know, you can see the carving lines with the light of translucency. Go aside there. Forgot these yesterday too. They really do a great job. It looks a little fuzzy. What is that? You sort of have to get through the whole ground with the sgraffito tool first. I really don't work quite this fast in my studio because I'm wanting not to be boring. I'm not being as precise, but I'm being a lot quicker.
How long have you been doing these kinds of forms?
You know, these forms have evolved over 30 years, but if you look back into 50 years ago, you'd see the piece is a lot different. The way that I work is that I evolve slowly. And I like to do iterations or repetitions of the same thing, but keep pushing the edge of what I'm doing. I find that very diverting, you know, in some kind of strange way. But the forms always continue to evolve. So that over the course of a year, you'll see some new forms, you'll see some evolution. Over the course of 1 or 2 work cycles, not as much. Over the course of 5 years, you'll see quite a different work. However, some of these same patterns were patterns that I was doing on the surface of pots before I ever even thought of altering them. I did a lot of carving surface lines underneath my celadon glazes before, well, they were still really traditional, well, classical or oriental shapes, little bottle forms, and that sort of thing. But they're the celadon, okay, the traditional way, the aesthetic was porcelain, was celadon glaze that was carved under, and I did that. But I was interested in movement, and I was always concerned that there was so much movement on the wheel when I drew that form. And then when it was completely fired and glazed, it was static. It was just going to stay like that for its whole life, which could be a lot longer than mine even. And does that thing have some sense of movement? You can put movement in by just making a perfectly balanced form. That form is going to stand there in movement and grace. Well, in my mind, I wanted to have movement going around the surface. So my patterns always did have that sort of spinning, this sort of sense before I ever started cutting all the way away. So I never changed that. They sort of changed a little bit, but the actual patterns that I've been carving have been similar. And the reason is that I'm not looking at them as patterns. I'm just looking at them as a carrier of motion. It's like people will come up to me at my shows and say, "Do you always work in white? Can't you use another color? Like, I really like this pot if it was pink," or whatever it was that they wanted. And I try to explain to people that actually I don't think of my pots as being white. I don't see that. I see light and shadow. I'm not working with white. I'm working with light and shadow. And I get the most light and shadow if I just leave the porcelain natural. So I tell them that they're welcome to buy the pot and paint it pink. It won't hurt my feelings at all. So you see I'm carving half of every line, and I'm doing that because I want the points to go down. We're going to pass this around. Just hold it from the bottom because it's greenware. This is a rough carved greenware that I did yesterday, and it's dry now. And it's the same piece that I did today, that I'm doing today. But if you look at it, you can see how I've carved these into points. And then I've carved this top point, carved into a point, and this bottom point, carved into a point. Well, if I'm going to do that, then my line's got to switch at some time, right? It's going to have to. Like, drawing on a surface. This is a little digression, but if I make this sgraffito line like that, oh, I can't do this up now. I'm trying to make sort of parallel lines. Okay, and then I come back and I carve away. Let's say I'm just carving away all of the back side of every one. Then you see here, now we've got the convex sides on this side, right? So I have to carve away on the other side of the line. Well, here it is. See? Well, see, that's what I'm doing with my pot. And then, so you can see how you're creating sort of more movement because of that going back and forth. And then when I come back later and I sand that down, you're not going to see, I don't do that. I'm doing this because this is still wet. But you can see sort of how you lose the line that the same line that I made with this isn't there anymore because you cut away to one side or the other. But if you just cut away only on the same side, it would give you a whole different look. Maybe it would be pleasant, but you know that's what's happening on there. And I mention it because I think you might not notice it if you didn't have somebody tell you because it's sort of subtle.
Jennifer, when you make the
shape? Do you measure things out or do you just eyeball and curve the spiral?
Like what I'm doing now?
When you throw that and when you alter it and make those spiral humps, do you
Oh,
measure around?
like that?
Yeah, diameter?
Yeah, and that will be the last thing I'll demonstrate to you. But what I'm trying to do with that is to just this is my own aesthetic. There's not a structural reason for, well, there might be, but anyway, my own aesthetic is to try and keep those diagonal corrugated alterations parallel. So what that does is it starts you out with a vertical, and as your belly of your pot gets wider, that will turn more horizontal until you get down lower where you've got it's coming in tighter. And so to keep those vertical lines, then you have to keep those parallel lines, you have to then move back into the vertical. Yeah. So I look at this and I'm trying to find all of the pointed edges. You see how I'm following this on down past my graffito line. So when I get them all done on the one side, I come back and since I continue to work with my right hand, I'm flipping the piece.
Do you ever get a kind of chattering when you're pulling your?
Yeah, I do get it chattering.
How do you prevent it? Is there any way to
Well,
prevent it?
the sharper your tool, the less likely you're to have chattering. Also, if you do this part of the carving on the soft side of leather hard, you get less chattering. If you're talking in front of an audience, you're probably going to get more chattering.
In the final firing, have you found that heating it up fast or slow or holds or no holds makes a difference with how it's going to change the
No, I think it may, if you hold your temperature at vitrification, it does tend to, well, it tends to make your cones go down more. So I'm not sure. You know, it's a good question, and it's not one that has been all that easy for me to figure out or have a reason even to wonder about, because it's so unscientific to do it.
But it didn't take you a lot of trial and error to do that, and you just started.
Well, I basically go by my witness cone. Okay, it's like it depends on where my elements or thermocouple happens to be at that time. But I try to have the 10 well sunk, you know, but not touching, just like so. And I follow it with the witness cones. And if a firing seems a little on the cool side of me, I'll add an extra 15 So kind of, press, it's all with the electronics. Okay, so once I've cut all of the, made all of these cuts, I'll look around for the ones that I've missed. And so I've done all of the surface, the rough cut surface area. I will come back and I will sand all of the tool marks out with a little scrubby and sponges, and I'll show you that actually. I can do that because I've got that piece of green here. But at this point, this is where I'm at. Whoa. So now I'm going to go ahead and cut my edge. And I've got this X-Acto blade, and I'm going to follow, I'm going to actually, what I'm doing when I'm cutting edge, what I'm thinking about is how this piece, the negative and positive space, and it is sort of working together on this edge to create a flow that has started in the corrugation and in the pattern. Well, now it's come up to the edge, and what I want is to see the same sort of balance of negative and positive space incorporated into the edge of the piece. So that's why I have put these little spikes, and well, I'm adding a few more spikes because I think I want it to be a little more raggedy. Cutting the edge. This is where it starts going down. It's following the overall pattern the way I set up. That's too much stuff. Go ahead and cut that out of there.
Does this work on other types of clay?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I think if you've got a really groggy clay, that it might not be as good as a smooth clay, but there's plenty of other clay bodies that are smooth.
You could say, that would be just like the top of your top for the fire, you know?
Yeah,
Is that possible?
right. You're right. I can do this carving with other clay bodies, but I'm not going to get the movement in the firing. I will not get the malleability with other clay bodies as much as you do with porcelain. There are some clay bodies that will move some on you. Sometimes I use the the number 20 terracotta by Laguna Clay, and if you fire that up to vitrification, which is cone, like its highest vitrification point possible, which is about cone 4, you are going to see that you're going to get some movement. Especially the more weight you have in a piece, the more movement you can get in that piece. Or the more movement is going to happen whether you like it or not. So I was getting some movement with that, using that terracotta clay, which I decided I liked the look of, and firing to cone 4, doing these floor bases. And then I was finding I was getting too much movement, and at that point, so I looked for another. I found that I was able to use that B-Mix 10 that fires to cone 10, which is also a nice, easily sandable material, and I wasn't getting any movement. I mean, you have to figure out whether you want movement or not first, but if you do, probably porcelain prevents that. Okay, so the last thing I generally do with these pieces is I'll go ahead and put these devils into all of these little edges while it's still pretty leather hard. Enough of that nonsense.
You're doubling the cuts now?
Sorry?
You're doubling the cuts?
Yeah, you see how I just did those few little devils there? This is good enough because I want to move on. So this is the general idea of this. It's too heavy, don't pay attention to that. But I wanted you to get the idea of it. I can take out that. And now what I'll do right now is, while we're on this shape before we go elsewhere, I'm going to show you what I do to finish the piece. So the difference between this piece and this piece, you can see, oh, how much thicker this looks like. What about all of this? Okay, we have to pretend I have a mask on, because I always do that. I didn't bring my respirator. Whenever you're doing this part of the work, you wear a respirator. So basically, the first thing I do is to take this piece of scrubbing. This is the time-consuming part. You're welcome to listen to a book on tape while you do this.
That looks like a kitchen sponge.
Yeah, this is actually the Scotch-Brite scrubby, and I found that the purple works a little better than the green. The purple is the extra fine, and the green is just the fine. It's a little harder to find, but I get them in the big sheets like this at Ace hardware store, and cut them I cut it up into 12, so one of those square will give me 12 pieces like this. The purple is slightly softer, and I thought it was going to be worse. I thought it wasn't going to work as well, but it cuts just as well and actually has a little bit more flexibility. So my highest recommendation on scrubby is the purple Scotch-Brite. So you basically want to go over the whole ground of the surface carving with this before you do anything else. I'm just going to do this one line, okay? See, I can get right in there. You start with this because if I started with a sponge, I couldn't knock this all the way down. I would be just removing all of the material, whereas the dry scrubbing actually can pull away that in every bit of that line. Okay, so there's where the line crossed over, right? This is bone dry, okay? And that's a good question. This piece, we're pretending this piece is completely bone dry because, and the top of it is, but you really just want to wait before you sand your piece until it's completely bone dry because it's stronger. And if you've got a piece that's almost bone dry, you will end up breaking that piece a lot easier. It's like a soggy cracker. How if you have a nice dry cracker out of the crisper and you bite onto that, it feels like it's harder to bite through, but if you try to bite a soggy cracker, it's like just will flick apart. Well, that's what happens with clay, especially porcelain. And if I'm working in a really humid environment, I know my greenware is more fragile. I will put it in my kiln and soak it for about 2 hours at about 200 degrees, and then take it out and work with it, and it's like a brisker. And I've actually made that porcelain so it's harder, that moisture that is in the air is going to soften your greenware, and it's going to make it much easier to crack. So if I'm working on these pieces, like right now, this is a pretty heavy piece, and I'm trying to show you guys, so I'm sitting here working in my lap. But generally at home, I'm like this, and I hold this piece like that, especially the pieces that are more open like that. I don't lay them. I know when I teach workshops, sometimes the students are not comfortable and they lay them on big pieces of foam, and that does seem to work for people. But I don't. I'm holding this in my hand. There's one muscle right there that really knows when I've been sanding at the end of the day. So anyway, that is how that goes. And you know, you're welcome to take a look at this line. I'm not going to make time for further of this, but if you get a chance to peruse this particular line, you'll see how I just that little standing changes. Okay, let me finish though. After that, then like when I go over the whole ground with this, okay, I guess I should do a point too. Same thing's true as these points. You see, you just sand this right down like that. So now look how that edge is nice and thin. It's not. I mean, it's pretty thin, but you can go ahead and you create that illusion of extreme fragility by making your edges that thin. And then everybody's too scared of your work to buy it. And I'm sure it's such a good idea, but you know, it works that way. And so after that, I will come by with my elephant ear sponge, but I use clean water, and I'll just like smooth out any of my scrubby marks, you know, using this sponge. And then like I use these two tools a lot for sanding too. After I've gone over the whole area with the scrubby, you know, I can get in there and I can really get these edges beautifully using these tools like that.